Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission du format Super Friends. C'est dans ce podcast qu'on va à la rencontre des personnes qui font vivre la bande dessinée par leur travail. On vous a proposé une émission spéciale bande dessinée de SF avec Avaler la Lune il y a très peu de temps chez Casterman et on poursuit d'ailleurs chez cet éditeur avec le premier album de science-fiction de Viktor Hachmang, qui est donc un jeune auteur qui vient de signer sa première BD et avec qui nous allons pouvoir discuter en anglais tout prochainement. Juste après le générique d'ailleurs, qui va se lancer et donc on se retrouve en anglais. So that was my quick introduction in French. Victor, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
This is your second. This is the third day of the festival. Are you tired already or not?
Very much, to be honest.
Yeah.
It, the amount of people, has been overwhelming in a way. But I really love how it's going now.
So, since it's the first time we speak together, I have to ask the very basic questions first. Who are you, Victor? What did you do before doing comics?
My name is Viktor Hachmang. I'm 36 years old. I'm a Dutch comics artist, a graphic designer. And I'm living in Den Haag, Lae, in Holland, and I've been working in this field for over 15 years now.
What brought you to this field? What do you like about drawing, about art, about design?
Yeah, well, I started as a graphic designer, but I was always very much in love with comics ever since I was a very young child. And slowly I got more into music, and poster design came with that, and LP cover design. And so graphic design sort of took over for me. But then when I studied graphic design in Holland, at a certain point I got quite bored with it. Holland is very known for their quite minimalist type of graphic design, and I liked it for a short while. But then my interest veered more towards illustration, more and more. So all my posters became more illustrative in a way, and slowly my love for comics, was reinvigorated, and it turned into full-blown comics again, I think.
Would you say that graphic design, if you compare to illustration or comics, is like the total opposite? In design, you tend to do less, and in illustration, you can do everything you want and do more? Yes.
Well, of course, it depends on what you want to communicate. But I think, the communicative aspect of graphic design is super important, whereas in illustration and in comics especially, I think the expressiveness is and the personality is much more important, and there's much more opportunity to actually express yourself in a very raw and open way, and therefore comics seemed more interesting to me at that time.
And there's a question I always ask my interviews is what do you like specifically about comics as a medium, as a form of art? What can comics do that other media cannot?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the layeredness of comics is really interesting. I mean, of course, it comes with the element of montage, which is more like film, of course. So the editing of it, making sequences, it comes with a whole, different set of possibilities. But also you have text, so there's also a layer on top of that where you can actually make, write stuff that supports the story or contrasts it. And I think this, these opportunities of these layers, I think they leave so many options for you to do whatever you want. Obviously, stylistically, you can do a lot more than you could do in graphic design, for instance. And so it's all these elements combined that, for me, makes comics like a complete art form. And I think we still haven't really even, seen what we could actually do with it. I think there's still more innovations that we can maybe experiment as a comics world altogether.
And is it like a goal for you to experiment and try to do new things with? So this is the first album, but you already we were speaking about that just after. But
okay.
You try at each story to reinvent yourself a little bit, to try to experiment in what you can do in terms of just drawing, but also, like you said, collage, montage, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. Of course. it all depends on what kind of story you want to convey, and it comes with a whole new set of stylistic choices that you could make. But I think also the fact that it's printed, I think, and paper choice and color choice, I think is also a whole new layer of storytelling that we could maybe experiment with. So I'm hoping to do that with every book, with all the books I make, to maybe reinvent that a little bit more or add something to that. Yeah.
So you mentioned just before that you were a reader of comics since a young age. Mm-hmm. I don't know what kind of comics you have in the Netherlands.
Well, comics aren't that big in Holland, to be honest, but I grew up with RG comics, and I was in love with that ever since I was maybe 4 years old or something. And so when I went to school, I would always go to my city library, which was quite small, but they had a really extensive comics collection for some reason. And every Wednesday I would cycle there and just, fill up my backpack with all sorts of comic books that interested me. And so I read everything under the sun. So I just picked up every book that of the cover that spoke to me. I would just pick it up. But then at a certain point, I found the comics of Moebius, and I think I was 7 or 8 or something. And of course,
so maybe a little too young to read.
Way
Moebius.
Too young. I didn't understand most of it. But the way that he drew was so expressive and complete and detailed that, my mom always told me, when I asked her, what should I draw? As some people do when they're a kid. And she would tell me, in comics, you can do anything. Just do anything. But when I picked up the Moebius comics, I really felt for the first time like, yes, it is possible to actually do anything you want. And so, those two influences were, really forming for me.
There were also, did they have American comics or mangas in your library or not?
For some reason, they were not that big in Holland. That came later. And honestly, I was not completely influenced by that as well. I picked some of them up, like early Spider-Man comics, for instance, that I thought were interesting at the time. But I sort of lost that. The American comics were not that big at the time. Now they are, though. And also Japanese comics, which in the village where I lived, nobody read that. But now they do. Yeah.
And is there a big like professional industry for comics in Holland? Like, are you the only comics artist in Holland, or are there more that we don't? Because we don't see much.
No, I think the most famous one is maybe now Aimée de Jong. She makes very good, interesting graphic novels. But I have to be honest that I consider myself to be a bit of an outsider to the comics world in general. Maybe also here in France. I also like I say, my work borders on graphic design sometimes, and so I have my feet in both fields, and so I'm not that well versed in the whole universe of.
And would you say it's an advantage to you?
I think so. I think it could be. I think, to have a sort of a sideways glance at both fields, you can make interesting mixes that maybe, like I said, push the envelope a little bit on what the medium could be. I think it's definitely an advantage.
So L'Arpenteur in French is your first published graphic novel or first comics album in France. But I see that you have some other comics published here. What are those?
Yes, maybe I can just take them out?
Yeah, sure.
Well, the first comic I did is a Dutch language comic. It is it is a reinterpretation of a dystopian novel from the 1920s. It's fully in Dutch, and so it's completely influenced by the style of utopian art from the 1920s. The Dutch art at that time was very known for their strict geometry. Like Mondrian is maybe the most famous example. But this was a novel that was written in 1920 by a very famous Dutch writer who is not famous outside of Holland, called Bordewijk. And when I read it, I thought this might be interesting to adapt. And so it turned into this completely maybe abstract comic book full of primary colors and like I said, very constructivist, minimalist, geometric.
It seems like more a graphic design comics.
Yes.
Almost.
I think that this book is my first step into trying to, develop into a narrative and into like the comics field more.
Okay.
I followed up with a series of very experimental short story collections with a British publisher called Landfill Editions. And we made extremely experimental comics, but you can already see that I'm starting to experiment with fluorescent colors and
Pantone.
Yes, with Pantone. So I think I've been experimenting with that for over 10 years, I think now, and trying to see what that layer could add to the storytelling. These short stories are all based on dreams I had, and so they tend to be wordless, and the subject and the arc are quite abstract in a way, but that's what I liked and that's what I wanted to experiment with.
So you don't want anyone to understand what's really going on.
Well, I don't think it's
just you, but other people don't.
No, it's not my primary objective, of course, but I just wanted to make something that felt true to myself and not take the readership into account. Just wanted to see, what came out.
But is it hard even for in your own country or for a British publisher to be published with this kind of very abstract project? Is it hard to sell to the publisher?
Well, this publishing house had quite a fanatic following for some reason, and so we made very short runs of print runs of these books. But they sold out really quickly for some reason, and so I never ran into problems with that. But of course, I know that short stories, they're not for everyone. And especially, I know I'm not making music for the millions when I'm producing these comics.
At least you're aware of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's a whole series of these books. And but I think all these experiments, so like I said, they're highly experimental. All these experiments, they ended up in L'Arpenteur for sure. And so that maybe gives you an indication of the fragmentary nature of the storytelling.
Okay, so we see on the cover of Bestiarium a character which looks like a little bit of Geo from L'Arpenteur. So
yes.
Was it like a prequel or a first idea that you would develop into a full story?
Yes, definitely. This story I started exactly at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, and there was already maybe some premonition of post-apocalyptic storytelling that I thought would be interesting because it captures the moment for me. Like it felt very doom-laden and a bit angsty, and so I think this is maybe like a practice run for L'Arpenteur. Yeah, for sure. Okay,
so let's go into L'Arpenteur. So, except for the character, what was the idea, the original idea from?
The idea was to make a story, a long-form comic about a wandering character who wanders around a ravaged landscape. Earth has become a really a big open-air dumping ground for trash. It's deemed uninhabitable, and a portion of the people of Earth have relocated into a completely artificial structure just outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And we follow one character who was marooned, this pilot who is crash landed onto this Earth, and he doesn't know obviously where he is, and he doesn't understand his surroundings. He can't make sense of it, and even like a drop of rain, he doesn't really understand what it is because this doesn't happen on his new artificial planet. He finds a copy of The Tempest by William Shakespeare in the rubble, and it sort of becomes his psychological guide into this new and strange and surreal environment. And that's how the story starts.
So, and where did you have a dream about that?
Well,
is it? I don't know. Like, did you play Death Stranding and you like the whole walking into the apocalyptic landscape, or?
No, the story behind it is actually quite personal because I went through quite a dark period at the time, and it took a couple of years where I really felt quite bad. And actually, when I closed my eyes at night, it really looked like this, the surrounding to me. And so, so I wanted to find a way to make something that was very true to the sci-fi genre, but also turn it into a very personal gesture. And so tell about my story of how to deal with depression, or maybe not how to deal with depression, but how it felt like to be quite depressed. But I hope it is a hopeful and maybe optimistic story in the end.
It really depends on your approach, I guess, for the reading, because at first we really like in the let's say a classical doom science fiction where so Earth is inhabitable, also we're supposed to see that humanity has relocated, like you said, in a satellite, and on the satellite, so it's worse than what it is right now between like the rich and the poor, and so are you? Pessimistic in nature? Are you seeing that really inequalities are going further and further, and because yeah,
exactly.
It's quite gloomy.
Well, there is a satirical element, of course. I think the story sort of touches upon things that I feel, because yes, I would say I'm a bit of a pessimist, that I feel are very present now. They're rising inequality, obviously. This hierarchical structure that can't really hold, I think. Obviously, isolation, where lots of people suffer actually from not being able to connect with their surroundings, the dark side of technology. I think all these things are touched upon quite lightly, maybe ambiguously, but I think clearly for the readership. And yes, I would say I'm a pessimist now that I'm summing up all of these themes, yeah.
So that's something very particular with the narrative, because you're writing to the second person of the singular. So we're not describing what Gio is doing, but he's maybe speaking to himself, or there's a voice, but the voice that you're reading as a reader is also the voice that puts you directly into the head of the main character. Mm-hmm. Was it the intent to really be put into the mind of Gio?
Yes. One of my main influences on my writing is the British sci-fi writer J.G. Ballard, and I think he puts it very interestingly. His science fiction is not interested in outer space, but in inner space. So it's more about, like you say, like the psychological ramblings of this character. But again, this story could be read in a couple of ways, because you could also read it like it is being said by one of the fantastical characters that sort of plays a background role called Ariel from the Shakespeare story. So you could actually read it in a couple of ways, either inner monologue or maybe external, somebody viewing our main character Geo wandering around. I leave that open.
And was it something that you wanted to do from the beginning? Because while reading it, I was thinking also that it could have been perfect also as a almost silent project, because you could just see him wandering and discovering and reading without having any text. Is there some version that at some point you maybe thought that it would be textless?
Yes, that was actually my first story. But my publisher advised me against
didn't want to.
I thought it would be more interesting if we made it even, if we made it extremely boring. If it was, because the story could be more crushing in a way, where it was just somebody wandering around a field of nothingness, and then suddenly a beam of light would capture something in this natural surroundings, like a little bug or a little bit of light on a raindrop. But then obviously my publisher said, this is too much. This is too extreme. Much. Yeah, we need some more supporting characters. Maybe it would be interesting to introduce another presence. And so there are a couple of more characters. Not that many, but there are. But yeah.
Not that many. And what is it about The Tempest? So why this book in particular? Is it are you a fan of it, or?
Yeah, obviously it's one of the pure classics by Shakespeare. There were a couple of reasons what I thought were interesting for introducing this book. Obviously, an influence is Robinson Crusoe, and Robinson finds the Bible, and he uses this as a sort of escapist device. He starts reading it, and it guides himself. It guides him. It takes it takes his attention away from his situation. But I really like this. But I started looking for. I'm not a religious man, so I started looking for maybe another interesting book, another work of art that could function in the same way. And I started reading The Tempest when I was quite young. Again, didn't understand much of it, but I picked it up again, and then actually found that this text says a lot about our current surroundings. It actually touches upon if it's okay for other people to have dominion over other people. It even at that time, quite revolutionarily, touches upon questions of colonialism, racism, and there's even a really interesting genderless character. And so I thought this could be an interesting artwork that could guide our character, maybe as a very classical voice that maybe could guide us now in our contemporary state.
I would say that. Do you think that also art can be a guide, but also in real life?
Yes.
Or maybe it happened to you also. There was a reading or a movie that really changed your way of thinking or seeing things.
Yes, definitely. I think while I was going through these circumstances, very small things that you pick up take on huge meaning. So definitely, art is a form of escapism, but also as a way to clarify maybe what is going on in your personal surroundings, but also in the large outside world.
We have to speak also about the construction of the book, of the drawing style. Did you take some time? Because when I just looked at your first book, it's nothing comparable. It's all very, very different. So did you have a hard time to find the style for this book, or was it easy for you, such you're used to experiment a lot? How do you set a tone, a graphic tone?
To me, it comes quite naturally. I knew the arc that I was going to try to develop throughout the story, but all these chapters, they came in a very improvisational, jazz-like way. So I didn't want to plan every page. I just started drawing, and then when the chapter was finished, the style sort of varies even between throughout the book, and I think the style adapts to the theme that I would like to express in these short chapters.
And even with the rhythm, with the panel that you're choosing, it's always maybe for you a way to make a page interesting for the reader, or even for you. Maybe you don't want to get bored drawing, I guess. So how do you approach the construction in terms of panels, in terms of pacing?
I do it on a spread basis. I want people to flick through the book, and that each spread is a surprise. That's the most important thing for me. So I approach it on 2 pages at a time. That's my way of working.
Each time. But and do you draw in the chronological order? Like you really start from the beginning to the end, or do you draw like some pages from the beginning, then you get to the end? It's
extremely fragmented. So I maybe start at the end. I think it's also interesting or important to mention to the listeners that the book is also not in chronological order. You could actually read it in a different order if you want. It now follows the seasons of 1 year, but you could actually maybe do it in another order as well. And I devised it in a way where you can actually read it in a couple of different ways. Yeah.
Okay. What's really striking also is the use of colors with the Pantone especially, and you mentioned before that you were interested also in what the colors and the intensity maybe of colors can add to the story. Can we dive a little bit into that?
Yes, obviously the world that I'm trying to depict is completely ravaged and polluted, and I thought the fluorescent colors would actually communicate this idea of chemical spilling and oil and light emitted in very strange horror-like fashion. That's the way I use the fluorescent colors in most of the book, where all the skies are emitting light in this sickly pale yellow. But also there's also pink light in it, where to me it's more hopeful and more like a lovely twilight sky. And I try to I tried to experiment with all the ways that I could use these fluorescent colors throughout the book.
I've been discussing with other artists that tell me that printing these fluorescent colors can be quite hard if you don't do a booklet, of 8 pages with the use of these colors. So is it also a challenge for just the printing part, for the more technical crafting of the book?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there were lots of test prints that were involved with this. And like I said, I've been experimenting with this for over 10 years.
So now you know how to do it.
Now I know. Yeah, but this is a good point, because what was the most extreme challenge was if I could make like muddy and brown colors with this fluorescent palette, because you have to keep in mind that all the colors that I used, apart from black, were fluorescent. But of course, I also wanted to make like more natural colors, and so that took a lot of time to actually do test prints. To find brown tones and other muted colors that fitted other parts of the story.
It really feels to me at the end that maybe the message is we can just be happy even by ourselves, only by ourselves. Is it the message you want to send, that even in the most desperate place, we can find some relief in just being okay with ourselves? Yeah,
I think it is about being okay with the fate, with the cards that you are dealt. That's how I experienced the end of the story. But of course, it's slightly open-ended. So I would love to hear other interpretations by other readers, of course.
Okay, so what's the next project? Are you working on something already, or are you just taking a break from this album before going to the next?
To be entirely honest, I'm completely empty at the moment. There's nothing left. I feel like a squeezed out lemon. There's no juice at the moment. But there will definitely be a new.
You still have other stories or other stuff to do.
But exactly. Yeah, there's always stuff to do. But there's nothing in the planning now at this moment.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Victor.
Thank you, Arno.